Good morning everyone. Welcome again. Today we will discuss topic paradigms of learning. In that we will discuss classical conditioning today in chapter 6. So let's start paradigms of learning. Learning takes place in many ways. There are some methods that are used in equation of simple responses, while other methods are used in the equation of complex responses. In this section, you will learn about all these methods. So, let's start with conditioning. What is conditioning? The simplest kind of learning is called conditioning. Means the type of learning that involves stimulus response connections. That is conditioning. Here is about learning again. The meaning, the process of learning association between environmental stimuli and behavioral responses. This is learning. So the first one is called in conditioning. There is two types of conditioning have been identified. The first one is called classical conditioning and the second one is operant conditioning or instrumental conditioning. In addition, we have observation learning, cognitive learning, verbal learning, concept learning and skill learning also. So today we will discuss only classical conditioning. Classical conditioning. This type of learning was first investigated by Ivan P. Pavlov. And classical conditioning means a form of learning that involves the use of stimulus to generate a specific response. Classical conditioning can help people adapt to the environment, can help eliminate troubling fears or other behaviors. That is classical conditioning. Here is about Ivan Petrovich Pavlov. Means Ivan P. Pavlov. As I told you, it was investigated by Ivan P. Pavlov. He was primarily interested in the physiology of digestion. During his studies, he noticed that dogs on whom he was doing his experiments started secreting saliva as soon as they showed the empty plate in which food was served. You must be aware saliva secretion is a reflexive response to food or something in the mouth. Pavlov designed an experiment to understand this process in detail, in which dogs were used once again. In the first phase, a dog was placed in a box. This is an experiment that was done by Ivan Petrovich Pavlov. So we will discuss this full experiment in detail. So here is about again conditioning. Conditioning is a modification of natural response. By conditioning, Pavlov modified the behavior of dog in which experimented. Now we modify the behavior of the learner in such a way as the response originally connected with the particular stimulus comes to be aroused by a different stimulus. The classical experiment conducted by Pavlov will make clear the process of conditioning. Here is, you can see picture of dog. So let's discuss the experiment of conditioning, classical conditioning given by Ivan P. Pavlov. So in the first phase, a dog was placed in a box and harnessed. The dog was left in the box for some time. This was repeated a number of times on different days. In the meantime, a simple surgery was conducted. One end of the tube was inserted in the dog's jaw and the other end of the tube was put in the measuring glass. The experiment setup is illustrated in that figure you can see here and also in your book. So in the second phase of experiment, the dog was kept hungry and placed in harness with one end of the tube ending in the jaw and other end in the glass jar. A bell was sounded and immediately thereafter food, means meat powder, was served to the dog. The dog was allowed to eat it. For the next few days, every time the meat powder was presented, it was preceded by the sound of a bell. After a number of such trials, a test trial was introduced in which everything was the same as the previous trials except that no food followed at the sounding of the bell. The dog still salivated to the sound of the bell, expecting presentation of the meat powder as the sound of bell had come to the connected with it. This association between the bell and food resulted in acquisition of new response by the dog. Salivation to the sound of bell. This has been termed as conditioning. You may have noticed that all dogs salivate when they are presented with food. Food is thus an unconditional stimulus here, and salivation which follows it unconditional response. After conditioning, salivation started to occur in presence of sound of the bell. The bell becomes a conditioned stimulus and the saliva secretion a conditional response. Here you can see unconditioned stimulus is food, unconditioned response is salivation, neutral stimulus is bell, and no conditioned response is here. You can see before conditioning. This is before conditioning. During conditioning, this is the process: bell, food, response, salivation. And after conditioning, conditioned stimulus and conditioned response. Here is also to understand unconditioned stimulus is food, unconditional response is salivation, bell, no response, and during conditioning, bell plus food, UCS, food is UCS, salivation, UCR. After conditioning, only bell had come, that is CS. CS means conditioned stimulus and salivation is conditioned response. There is no food but salivation continue. So this is an experiment done by Ivan P. Pavlov. Here is about again classical conditioning explains some learning of involuntary emotional and physiological responses. Dog drooling when it smells food and later when it hears a bell. It is important for us as a teacher to understand, since school is often the cause of unintentional learning through classical conditioning, especially anxiety. So test anxiety condition has to have general school anxiety. So next time we will discuss determinants of classical conditioning. That's it for today. Thank you.